On the day of the wedding, as I looked at Justin's impatient gaze and furrowed brows across from me, I suddenly felt a sense of emptiness. The MC asked, "Bride, do you want to marry the groom?" I removed my veil and smiled, replying, "I don't want to." I had been entangled with Justin for 12 years. How many 12-year periods can one person have in their lifetime? "Justin, as you wish. I'll set you free," I said, leaving those words behind as I walked out without a second glance. I checked into a hotel, turned off my phone, and simply surrendered to sleep. When I awoke, it felt as though I had traveled back to when I was 16, the year I first met Justin. He was just an innocent, naive boy at the time. My parents had passed away in a car accident, leaving behind a significant compensation fund. Whoever had custody of me would have control over the money. Which was more important, genuine feelings or real wealth? I didn't know. I told the lawyer that I didn't need a guardian and that the money should stay untouched until I turned of age. My grandmother scolded me, calling me ungrateful, while my aunt labeled me cruel and asked why I couldn't help her. I walked away, suitcase in hand, because they had all forgotten that before everything, they used to say that I was cursed, that I brought bad luck, and that I was somehow responsible for my parents' death. I transferred to a new school alone and rented a new place. I thought I would be strong, but when I came down with a fever and my body convulsed, I experienced helplessness and loneliness for the first time. I dragged myself to get medicine and endured the discomfort. That day, in a dim and narrow hallway, I met Justin. He appeared like a beacon of light coming toward me. I fainted in his arms. At 16, I believed Justin was the light that would guide me out of darkness. I was sick for nearly a month, and Justin, who lived across from me, took care of me. His parents, upon learning of my situation, were kind to me too. My 16th year finally felt warm again. Despite losing my parents and being abandoned by everyone, I clung to this newfound warmth. After I recovered, Justin accompanied me on walks. We sat on the lawn, basking in the sun. He looked at me quietly and smiled, saying, "Grace, I'm your savior. You have to repay me for saving your life." His youthful smile was etched in my memory. At that moment, I smiled back and asked, "How should I repay you, my savior?" He blushed and stammered, struggling to find the words. After I transferred to the new school, Justin and I became desk mates. He excelled academically, easily solving problems I couldn't understand, and patiently explained everything until I finally grasped it. Looking back, my heart still warms at those memories. I loved Justin then, and I truly believed he loved me just as much. But people change and love fades. The warmth we feel comes from the cold reminding us of its presence. By the time I woke up from my restless sleep, it was already the next afternoon. My phone was filled with unread messages. I quickly skimmed through them. Most were from friends, expressing their surprise. "Grace, you and Justin have been together for so many years. How could you just break off the engagement like this? What a shame. You two were a couple everyone envied. What happened?" I didn't have the energy to explain, especially when Justin called. "Where are you?" he asked. Just those 3 simple words, but I could hear the frustration in his voice. It was as though I had wronged him countless times. I remembered when he used to speak to me softly, every word like a tender touch. When did he change? His messages came one after another like fireworks of blame. "What do you mean, Grace? What did I do wrong? Why did you embarrass me in front of everyone? What's going on? There's nothing wrong, so who are you angry with? You've been like this for so long. I should have known better. I shouldn't have saved you." After all these years, perhaps he had regretted everything. But even now, he still thought I was just being difficult and throwing a tantrum. "I'll be back tonight. Let's meet. We can regret everything together and watch it all fall apart." "But I owe it to the past 12 years," he said, sneering. "I'm busy. I had to make time for this wedding. I told you to wait, but you insisted on this timing." He added sarcastically, "I agreed to marry you as you wished." What else do you want? Are you dissatisfied with how cheap I am? After more than 10 years of feelings, I had become the one forcing him. His reluctance was clear, and I had lost all motivation to keep pushing. "Okay, I know you're busy. We don't need to get married. It will save you time, I replied. He lowered his voice. Grace, do you think marriage is a joke? If we don't marry, don't ever mention marriage again. The future. How could there still be a future? Even now, he thought I was just making a scene and used the future as an excuse to pressure me into compromise. He was quiet for a long moment. Then I heard the faint sound of the call ending. I smiled, but the bitterness tugged at the corners of my mouth. No matter what had happened between Justin and me, I had grown up in his family. His mother had always been kind to me. Everything has a beginning and an end, and I owed her an explanation. It was around lunchtime, and we had agreed to meet at a nearby restaurant. When I arrived, Justin's mother looked worried. Upon seeing me, she tried to force a smile, but I could feel the discomfort in the air, especially when I noticed the table was full of dishes I liked. I felt a lump in my throat. Auntie? I greeted, sitting down as she urged me to. How are you? She asked. Of course I wasn't okay, but I smiled and told her I was fine. She didn't say much and just watched me eat in silence. Since yesterday, I hadn't eaten. After finishing, I looked up, still hungry, and saw the affectionate expression on Justin's mother's face. She took my hand and looked me over, and suddenly tears welled up in her eyes. Grace, why have you become so thin? You have to eat well, no matter what. This care, which I had lost for years, had now returned, but I didn't know how long I would have it. I held back my tears and smiled. Auntie, I do eat well. She gently touched my face. Grace, what happened between you and Justin? How did you get to this point? At that moment, tears welled up in my own eyes, and all the defenses I had carefully built up came crashing down. Yes, how did we end up like this? Was it because of time or because people's hearts are so unpredictable? I didn't explain much to Justin's mother. At this point, words felt meaningless. She didn't press further either, but asked me to think things over carefully and not to let myself down. Between Justin and me, if everything had gone smoothly, things might have turned out differently. But unfortunately, life doesn't always go as planned. Justin's father had suddenly suffered a heart attack, and the high medical expenses put a huge strain on the family. The daily needs of the three of them depended solely on Justin's mother's work. Justin had always been diligent, and his academic performance was outstanding. But when the acceptance letters from the prestigious universities arrived, Justin's mother smiled, then burst into tears. Child, you're so outstanding. I'm sorry for you. Justin sat on the sofa, his head down, overwhelmed with gloom. When he looked up again, he forced a pained smile. It's okay, Mom. I know Dad just had surgery, and the family has no money. I'll skip college and work to support you. His calm tone couldn't hide the hurt in his eyes. The sight struck my heart. On the balcony, in the cold night breeze, the figure of the young boy seemed so frail. That night, I remembered the many years ago when he had supported me in the same way. I approached him gently and smiled. I'm a little rich woman, my savior. Do you want me to repay you? He was stunned for a moment before his face darkened. Grace, how could I take your money? Absolutely not. At that time, I didn't understand. If we truly loved each other, why wouldn't he accept my help? That was the first time we had an argument, and it continued until the moon rose high. Our lips trembled in the cold air. I finally compromised, thinking he was trying to protect his dignity. But between his pride and me, he had already made his choice. However, we both still needed to attend college, and I followed Justin's decision. To make money, Justin started working part-time. Initially, he became a tutor, and due to his excellent performance in the college entrance exam, many parents were eager to hire him. He quickly gained more and more students. However, as his success grew, so did envy from others. After a child falsely accused him of abuse, no one wanted to employ him anymore. Frustrated, the young boy tightly clenched his teaching plans as if the world had turned its back on him. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It's all right. Let's go deliver food together, or even hand out flyers if that doesn't work. He embraced me, and though the faint scent of jasmine had long faded, I still remembered it vividly. Sorry, Grace, he murmured. I'll cherish you, and make it up to you in the future. That summer, Despite the relentless heat and the sweat dripping from our foreheads, I didn't feel particularly sad. On the contrary, the future that the young boy promised me gave me hope and made me believe in it deeply. Neither of us could have predicted that such sincere, passionate love would eventually fade away in the endless flow of time. I found myself wandering aimlessly through the streets, feeling lost and detached. My phone kept buzzing, and when I checked it, I saw that my classmates from the alumni group were discussing the situation between Justin and me. There were many opinions, but they all seemed to ask the same question. What had happened to Justin and me? The once envied golden couple? Since I was also in the group, their guesses didn't stray too far. But what I didn't expect was for a senior to directly criticize Justin, saying, "Some men are just useless. It's fine if they're no good themselves, but they can't stand seeing others do better." The group fell silent for a moment, and despite the fact it was just an online chat, I could feel the awkward tension. Justin didn't respond, and the chat became quiet again. I absent-mindedly bought a cup of milk tea. There were lots of people on the street, but I felt like I couldn't hear anything. Hungry and weary, I sipped my tea in a daze. Just then, my phone vibrated again. It was another message from the group. Vivian, the senior who had spoken earlier, sent a sweating and eye-rolling emoji, followed by a long text. "Senior, have you misunderstood something? You don't really know Justin, do you? Isn't it a little harsh to say that? Has someone told you something?" The senior replied quickly, "Oh, I wonder who it is. Isn't that the famous green tea girl, always pestering someone even though she knows he has a girlfriend?" Vivian responded, "Don't think everyone's like Justin. I don't know what your problem is, but if you love drama so much, I'll build a stage for you." Her tone was blunt, and I thought it perfectly suited Vivian's character. Looking up, the sunlight felt almost blinding, even on a cloudy day. I lowered my head, and ironically, the milk tea I had bought was green tea flavored. A bitter smile spread across my face, and tears welled up in my eyes. When had Vivian become a part of the story between Justin and me? During that time, Justin's father's illness kept recurring. His condition was usually managed with medication, but Justin's mother also fell ill, and the family's finances became strained. After Justin's father stopped taking his medicine for a while, his condition worsened, and he had to be rushed to the emergency room. The doctor said he would need another costly surgery. Without hesitation, I paid for the operation. The doctor, sweat dripping from his brow, came out and announced that the surgery had been successful. Justin, who had been looking down the entire time, suddenly lifted his head, his eyes shining with something new. "Grace, thank you. Thank you so much," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. I smiled and hugged him gently. "We're family. There's no need to thank me." His arms tightened around me as if he wanted to hold me forever. I didn't know how much time passed, but by the time he had enough strength to go into the ward, the entire side of my shoulder was wet from his tears. I thought, "Justin, you're really worth it. You deserve all my kindness." Later, in Justin's father's hospital room, I met Vivian for the first time. She had a messy bun and bright, deep dimples. When she smiled, she placed fruits and milk on the table and sweetly asked, "Uncle, how are you feeling?" Justin's father looked a bit confused. Justin introduced her. "This is Vivian, a junior from my research group." Justin's mother gave Vivian a brief, scrutinizing glance, but she quickly hid it. Vivian, not missing a beat, ran over to Justin's mother's side with a big, innocent smile. "Auntie, I brought some soup my mom made for Uncle. It's good for his health." Justin nodded in agreement. "Yes, Auntie's cooking is really good." Vivian's gaze then shifted to Justin, and I could feel her intense affection toward him. It was clear that she liked him, and not just a little. Her feelings for him were strong, almost obsessive. Vivian stayed for over 20 minutes before leaving. After she said her goodbyes, I went out to ask the doctor about Justin's father's condition. When I came back, I overheard Justin's mother speaking to him in a low voice. "Justin, what's going on between you and that girl?" she asked. Justin seemed momentarily caught off guard, but he quickly denied it. "Mom, don't overthink it. There's nothing going on. We're just friends." His mother sighed with relief. "That's good. You mustn't let Grace down." Justin, looking sincere, promised, "Don't worry, I won't." So I wasn't too concerned about Vivian's presence. I believed that nothing could come between Justin and me, but I never expected that she would continue to appear so frequently. Justin, who had never been someone to use his phone much, began to chat with Vivian often. Sometimes he'd be staring at his screen, laughing to himself. I'd lean in and ask, "What's so funny?" He'd quickly close the screen and respond stiffly, "Oh, nothing." Someone sent me a funny emoji. I knew it was a bit ridiculous, but I couldn't help the feeling of suspicion that gnawed at me. One night, when Justin was asleep, I checked his WeChat. It was a conversation with Vivian. The message read, "Good morning, senior. It's not too early, right? Hurry up, I'm going to the park with my classmates today. I'll send you some nice photos later. I think Big Laser Bones is you." Later that afternoon, during our camping trip, I remembered how Justin had slept for 3 hours next to me and hadn't been able to wake up even with a straw. He had no time to kiss me in the morning, but he could easily send a good morning to another girl. They seemed to share their lives with each other. In his phone's album, there were several pictures of Vivian in the park. Although their words didn't seem overly flirtatious, the images made me feel a deep, cold emptiness inside. One message from Vivian caught my eye. "Senior, I really want to eat beef steak with green peppers. Didn't you say you're good at making this? You're so amazing, I can't cook it at all." Justin replied with a proud emoji, and Vivian sent one back, a pitiful-looking emoji. I didn't know how to feel anymore. "Beef steak with green peppers at noon tomorrow, sure. I'll make you a big portion, but don't overeat and hurt your stomach," Justin said. Vivian sent back a simple smile, responding, "It's fine if it hurts. Last time when I sprained my ankle, wasn't it you who took me to the hospital?" Justin replied with an emoji of annoyance. After reading their exchange, I put down his phone and looked at his sleeping face beside me. It seemed the same as before, but something felt different now. Since when had the things that were supposed to be shared between us started to be replaced by another girl? I couldn't help but feel that the beefsteak with green peppers, which I thought was something special just for me, was now something he was preparing for her instead. The boy who should have been mine no longer felt as pure as before. Unable to sleep, I tossed and turned, unsure whether to ask if I should save a seat for him at the restaurant I'd booked for my birthday the next day. Of course, he didn't show up. He seemed to have forgotten that while he was making food for someone else, there was a girl longing for his presence, waiting for him on her birthday. It wasn't until I called him in the evening that he suddenly realized and apologized. "Sorry, Grace. I've been too busy and forgot. I'll make it up to you," he said. He explained that he wouldn't be home until midnight because of a pile of data to analyze. I sighed and said it was okay before hanging up. I grabbed the meals I had cooked and went to school. Just as I walked through the school gate, a heavy rain began to pour. Soaked and shivering from the cold, my vision blurred in the downpour. But through the rain, I could still clearly see that the young man who had once offered me warmth had now offered his shoulder, which was supposed to make me feel safe, to Vivian. He carefully carried Vivian on his back, his expression serious as he crossed a low area. She giggled on his shoulder, and with one hand, he held an umbrella over them. The rain dripped down from it as he looked back at her, his eyes full of concern. They shared a sweet, affectionate smile. I dialed Justin's number. I saw him take the phone out of his pocket, but before he could answer, Vivian snatched it away, hanging up. The phone fell to the ground along with the food I had made. I stood there, questioning our 12-year relationship. It didn't seem as unshakable as I had once thought. It now appeared full of cracks and flaws. I still remember that night's rain. It was so heavy, and the cold was so intense it felt like being trapped in an ice cellar. Even now, the drizzle that began to fall from the sky made me smile bitterly. God had always been unfair to me. Why did he keep striking me when I was already so down? I tossed the milk tea aside, turning around, and a car pulled up beside me. Justin stepped out, his face grim and filled with anger. He threw a card at my feet. "Grace, is this the card you gave my mom? What's this supposed to be? A breakup fee?" I glanced at the card, recognizing it as the one I had just given to Justin's mother. I nodded. Before I could say anything, Justin grabbed my wrist tightly. "Do you think money can solve everything? I was once your Grace, but now I'm just Grace, like everyone else, just by my name." Our 12 years together appeared unchanged on the surface, but everything had already transformed beyond recognition. Yet, despite everything, he was still the Justin I had loved. No matter what the future held, I would always cherish our relationship in my heart. Auntie has been kinder to me than my own mother, I said. This is how I show my filial respect to her. He sneered, shook his head, and looked at me with disdain. That's my mom. I'll take care of her myself. I don't need you. I nodded. Then consider this a breakup fee. He was furious now, his face turning red, eyes cold. Grace, what exactly do you want to do? My patience has limits. I took a deep breath, looking up at the sky as raindrops hit my forehead. Painful and cold, but they also cleared my mind. At least I didn't want to keep standing in the rain anymore. Let's break up. My heart ached, but the weight in my legs seemed to lighten. Justin, this 12-year relationship has become a burden for you. We're both exhausted. I'm willing to give you the freedom you want. The intensity faded from his eyes, replaced by confusion. He was stunned for a long moment. Finally, he stared into my eyes as though trying to read something. Are you serious? I looked at him and nodded. His face stiffened and the corners of his mouth twitched in the faintest, almost imperceptible way. Grace, I can tolerate you embarrassing me at the wedding, but don't push me to the edge over and over. I scoffed. Bottom line, Justin, what exactly is your bottom line? I asked him, my voice steady. I stared at him intently, hoping to find the answer in his eyes. His gaze faltered. My bottom line, Grace? Don't you know it? I knew what it was. Perhaps not when I was younger, but certainly after graduation. I had realized it only then. For Justin, it was fine that I was capable, as long as I didn't surpass him. After we graduated, our paths diverged. He wanted to stay in school for postgraduate studies, but his family situation wasn't ideal. I suggested that I should start working to ease the financial strain. He held my hand tightly and said with conviction, No. If anyone's going to work, it should be me. You should focus on your studies. He smiled again and added, It's not easy to find a job right now. I'm worried you won't get one. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But now, looking back, I realized that look in his eyes wasn't one of concern. It was one of quiet belittlement. I'll give it a try. If I don't find one, I'll come back and prepare for the postgraduate exam. Don't worry about me, I told him, thinking I was being considerate. But he frowned and stood up. Grace, why do you never listen to me? I told you won't find one, and you didn't. At that moment, I saw how his personality had started to change. I was trying to be helpful, but somehow I became the one in the wrong. That night, we fought for a long time, neither of us willing to back down. Finally, in a fit of rage, he smashed the teacup I had given him and stormed out. I stood there, staring at the shattered pieces on the floor. It felt as though my heart had been sliced open by tiny shards of glass. I was terrified of the pain that came with losing something precious. I had already lost the most important things in my life before, and I didn't want to experience that agony again. My chest felt tight, but I still ran after him, my legs trembling with fear and uncertainty. At that moment, my heart and mind were entirely focused on the back of the young man, and I didn't notice a car speeding towards me on the road, knocking me down. Everything turned into chaos. The last image I saw before I lost consciousness was still the young man's eyes and eyebrows. When I woke up, I found Justin standing beside my bed, staring at me. His eyes were red, and for the first time, they were filled with guilt. Grace, you're finally awake. I'm so sorry. Really sorry, he said, gripping my right hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His face was overwhelmed with remorse. In that instant, I suddenly realized that the teacup didn't matter anymore. The young man was still here, and that meant everything could be fixed. I smiled, though it was a little strained due to the bandages, and reassured him, It's fine. He hugged me tightly. Let's not argue anymore in the future, okay? He said softly. You don't know how worried I was about you, he continued. As I was wrapped in the warmth of the moment, I had a foolish thought. If Justin and I could live in happiness forever, I'd be willing to be hit by a car every day just to make it happen. He apologized over and over, and honestly, I didn't blame him either. There was another person in the room. a young woman with short hair. She looked neat and capable, and every word she spoke was clear and straightforward. "Excuse me, let me introduce myself. I'm Laura Lee, and I'm the one who accidentally hit you," she said. I didn't expect this to happen. Laura was a significant figure in my life. We both shared an interest in machinery, and she had invited me to start a business with her. She presented an impeccable plan for development and future prospects, which I found very tempting. I told Justin about it, and he smiled, saying, "Starting a business isn't easy." But he didn't argue with me, even though I had to be hospitalized. When I decided to start the business with Laura, Justin repeatedly told me, "You're just fooling around. You won't last long." But I didn't pay much attention to him. Laura had an impressive understanding of the market and a great ability to execute plans. The journey to establish the business wasn't as easy as we'd hoped. There were times when we stayed up for days just working to revise one part of the plan. Thankfully, our hard work eventually paid off, and we started to make progress. Over time, the business grew, and we made a name for ourselves in City A. Justin stopped criticizing my decision, but looking back now, it seems that after that, we communicated less and less. Silence had started to replace the good morning kisses. The beef steak with green peppers had long turned into leftovers he brought home casually. Even when we lay in bed at night, he always turned his back to me, saying he'd been busy with academic research. I was busy too. In fact, I was so overwhelmed that I didn't notice how much Justin was pulling away from me. But if I were less successful, would Justin have returned to me, giving me his full attention? I didn't dare to take that risk. I used to love him deeply, but I always feared the worst. If I had built my life around his love, what would I do if he stopped loving me? I couldn't live like that. "Justin, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't care about you anymore. I don't want to deal with your ego or your boundaries anymore. Grace, it's been 12 years. Everyone knows we can't break up. Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" "You're only going to make me dislike you more," Justin said, frustrated. "Dislike? Why would anyone want to spend their life with someone they dislike?" I retorted. "Does Vivian know about this?" I asked suddenly. Justin froze. "Why are you bringing her up? What does she have to do with this? Everyone knows we can't break up." He seemed agitated, as if I had touched a nerve. "Grace, don't bring unrelated people into this. If you want to break up, fine, but don't regret it." I shook my head. After being together for so many years, you should know my personality. I never regret what I decide." He got in the car, slammed the door shut, and drove off, splashing mud all over me. The person I had loved didn't even have the courage to admit that he had been distracted in our relationship. I should have let go of him earlier. I moved out and bought a modestly sized house in a quiet area. When my senior found out about the breakup, she suggested inviting some friends over to warm the house for me, worried that I might be too sad to cope. She brought drinks and cooked several dishes, and we all sat around the dining table. At first, no one dared to bring up Justin and me, but as time passed, they realized that I wasn't as sad as they thought I'd be after ending a 12-year relationship. Honestly, I didn't expect it either. After losing Justin, I only felt a dull ache when I thought of him, mostly in moments of loneliness. Ultimately, I had come to understand that life is for myself, and Justin wasn't the only person in my life. Curiosity got the best of a few classmates who couldn't resist asking, "Why did you break up with Justin? I thought you two were really close." My response was simple and to the point. "Probably because we don't love each other anymore. We're both tired." The room fell silent, and everyone looked at each other with somewhat mysterious expressions, but that was the truth. Love isn't just about passion. It's about responsibility. In love, we might get tired, but we can't be half-hearted. The person who's half-hearted isn't the one I want in my future. With the company of my classmates, I did feel much better. Plus, I was really busy with business matters, and soon I had adjusted to living alone. But Justin didn't seem to be adapting well to it. One day, he showed up at my doorstep. His face was hollow, and there were a few stray stubbles. He looked thinner, and I was taken aback. In my memory, Justin had always been full of energy, and I had never seen him in such a worn-out state. He smiled at me, a bright and cheerful smile, but there was something off about it that made me uncomfortable. I felt like he was ruining the happy memories I had of him. Grace, I'm free lately. Let's pick a day and book a restaurant for our wedding again. Don't worry, I've already explained everything to your relatives and friends. They won't have a problem with it, he said, his tone almost pleading. My chest tightened, but I knew we could never go back to what we once had. Even though he was gently calling me Grace now, I still remembered how in the past he used to shout my name with tears in his eyes and his teeth clenched. There's no need, Justin. I've already set you free. Our past was beautiful. Let that beauty remain in our memories. No one is indispensable. Let's move forward with our own futures. His eyes grew red and he spoke softly. Grace, what happened? What went wrong between us? Why did it turn out like this? Why are you asking me this? I said, shaking my head. Please, Justin, leave. He held my hand and shook his head in response. I won't leave, Grace. Don't you remember where we started? We promised to buy a big villa, have 2 children, and live a happy life together. The promise we made at the beginning had indeed been beautiful, but someone had disrupted the balance between us. I'm not as strong as I seem, he continued, his voice soft. Honestly, I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to relationships. Once I sense something that doesn't belong to me, in a person or situation, I erase my mark on it. Yes, I bought the villa. I treated your parents well. I kept that promise. But what about you? He stood there silently. I stared into his eyes. Do you still love me? Of course I love you, he answered quickly, but I couldn't help but sneer. But do you love only me? I asked. He hesitated and avoided my gaze, guilt evident in his expression. He didn't answer, but the silence spoke volumes. The answer was clear. I sighed. Justin, I don't want to make things worse between us. I used to love you deeply, and I believe you loved me too. But now, it's time to let go. With his head down, he walked away. His back, still slim, seemed smaller than before. I no longer had the same passion I once felt for him. I couldn't warm him up anymore. Not long after, Justin's mother called and invited me over for dinner. Coincidentally, I had lived in their house for many years, and there were still some things I hadn't taken with me. When I arrived, besides their family of 3, many of their close relatives were there as well. The relatives immediately took on the role of peacemakers, each trying to make things right. Grace, you've always been such a good girl. Your uncle has always thought highly of you. You've grown into such a beautiful young lady with a successful career. It's time for you to think seriously about your future, one of them said. Yes, Auntie's right. Another chimed in. I remember how well you and Justin got along. He said he was sorry for what happened last time. As women, don't we all wish for a good future? Don't be too picky about men. No matter how good your job is, nothing compares to finding a good husband. Justin is a great guy. How can you break up after being together for more than 10 years? You're both adults now. Don't be so childish. Justin's mother held my hand, sighing. It's all Justin's fault, my child. If you're unhappy, just vent your anger on him. He won't say a word. But Andy and I feel bad for you. We know Justin still loves you. I knew she meant well, but I also knew the truth. No matter how much she saw me as her daughter, she was still Justin's mother. As for what his relatives said, it no longer mattered to me. I had already made up my mind to sever all ties. I smiled and raised my wine glass, toasting each one of them. Thank you all for looking after me over the years. You may not know the details of what happened between Justin and me, but I'm no longer a child. I can make my own decisions. I'm going to be working in another city soon. Please take care of yourselves. The relatives exchanged awkward glances. Auntie frowned and cleared her throat. Why are you being so stubborn, child? Justin has been with you since he was a teenager. You've been with him for so many years, and now that you're successful, you don't want him anymore? Where's the fairness in that? Uncle added. Yeah, Justin saved your life once. How can you be so ungrateful? I gave a sneer and looked at Justin. He met my gaze, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. Can you really bear to let go of the 12 years of feelings between us? He asked quietly. I laughed and raised an eyebrow, glancing at Aunt. Falling in love is between two people, isn't it? When we first got together, if he hadn't been willing, I couldn't have forced him to be with me. Could I? Over the past 10 plus years, it wasn't just Justin who was delayed. I was delayed too. You're a woman as well. How can you think a woman's youth is less valuable than a man's? I paused, then added, besides, my success is thanks to my own efforts. Ask Justin if he contributed even a little bit. Aunt's face turned pale, her ears flushed with embarrassment, and she couldn't respond. I turned to Uncle, my expression serious. Yes, Justin once saved my life, but I've also saved Uncle Song. Even parents can't expect their children to repay their whole lives for one favor. I've been filial to both of you, and I've spent many years with Justin, always considering him. I have a clear conscience. Uncle's face darkened, looking no better than Aunt's. Finally, I cast a cold glance at Justin. Before you ask me if I can part with 10 plus years of feelings, maybe you should ask yourself first. Wasn't it you who abandoned me first? When I was buying a house, you said you had a project. When I was decorating, you had an academic conference. When I was buying furniture, you were still busy. Do you remember those were our agreements, not just mine? I paused for a moment, then pressed on. When everything was ready, you just came to take a quick look and sarcastically said, Grace, you're so rich. Justin's face turned red with shame, and I asked him, don't you remember? He shook his head quickly and tried to explain. No, I just made a casual comment. I stood up, frustration boiling over. What about on my birthday? What were you doing when I set the wedding date? Where were you when I was choosing wedding supplies? Justin shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around, but he couldn't find the words. I sneered and pulled out some photos. Let me show you something, I said, placing the first photo on the table. In this photo, Vivian is sitting next to you, holding a lunchbox. You're feeding her beefsteak with green peppers, the very same meal you made for me on my birthday. I paused and showed the second photo. In this one, she's holding your arm, looking up at you with adoration. This was on the day we set the wedding date, and you were supposed to be there with me. In the third photo, Vivian and Justin were embracing each other, their eyes shut and smiles on their faces. When I went to shop for wedding supplies, he left his fiancée to go to an amusement park with another girl. If I remember correctly, she kissed him on the Ferris wheel, and he didn't push her away. The relatives sat in silence, too afraid to speak. Justin's parents glared at him with visible anger, and I too stared at him. Justin, is this what you call loving me? I asked. He was mortified but managed to reply, you actually investigated me? Investigated? I snorted. I was busy back then with no one helping me. How could I have had time to investigate you? These photos are from Vivian's WeChat moments. Everything you did, every place you went, it's all written down by her. Why did Vivian do this? Simple. She wanted me to find out. Vivian is a classic two-faced person, but you couldn't resist the temptation. As they say, flies don't gather around a perfect egg. Justin opened his mouth, but only managed a weak, ah. I shook my head. At first, Justin, I wanted to protect your pride, not because I still loved you. I just didn't want to tarnish the beautiful memories I once had. What I've cherished all these years isn't you. It's the feelings of those 12 years. Justin seemed lost. Finally, he said, Grace, please listen to me. I didn't betray you. I waved my hand, cutting him off. Don't say another word. It's pointless and it doesn't matter anymore. Let's end it here. I turned to grab my bag, but then I heard a sharp sound. When I looked back, Justin had a palm print on his face. His mother was furious. How could you treat Grace this way? I raised you with so much effort. How could I have raised such an unfaithful, dishonorable, and shameless person? It was clear that Justin's mother was truly angry. Justin lowered his head, too ashamed to speak. She scolded him for what seemed like forever before turning to me, tears streaming down her face. Grace, don't do this. He's wrong. If he weren't my son, I'd want to beat him senseless. I embraced Justin's mother. It's done, Aunt. It's not your fault. She wiped her tears and grabbed my hand. Please forgive him. You've done so much for our family. I don't want to see you leave like this. Stay, and I promise Justin will treat you better from now on. She glared at him, and he quickly rushed over to apologize. I pushed him away gently. Aunt, there is no future for Justin and me anymore. Thank you for everything over the years. If you ever need help, just call me. I won't change my number. After saying that, I gathered my things and prepared to leave. Justin followed me to my room, holding my arm, his face full of regret. Grace, I know I was wrong. Please don't leave me. I promise I'll never do this again. I don't like Vivian. Please believe me. He then pulled out his phone, deleted Vivian's WeChat account, and blocked her number in front of me. I've only loved you from the time I was 16 until now. Reflecting on my relationship with Justin over the past decade, I thought he might not have truly loved Vivian, but could he not see what she was doing? Didn't he realize that his unclear relationship with her was causing me harm? He was addicted to Vivian's admiration, using it to prop up his fragile ego. Since he had chosen this ambiguous relationship, his later realizations meant nothing to me. His indulgence, his momentary distractions, and his actions, knowing they would hurt me, were unforgivable. There's no going back, Justin, I said. As I told you before, I have no regrets for what I've done, and I stand by everything I've said. After packing my things, I said my final goodbyes to Aunt Song. Most of the relatives had already left, leaving the living room empty. Aunt Song was crying so hard she almost collapsed, but I supported her. Without you, your uncle would have died long ago, and our family wouldn't have been as well off. It's all Justin's fault. Please forgive him, she pleaded. I wiped her tears and spoke softly. Neither you nor Justin's family owes me anything. I'll always remember the kindness you showed me, but now I have to go. I gathered my belongings and left Justin's home. As I closed the door behind me, I couldn't hold back my tears. From that moment, I was truly alone again. I moved to a new city and quickly adapted to my new life. My senior, who often kept in touch, would tease me occasionally, saying, "Oh, Grace, you're so pitiful. You have nothing except money." She also shared a lot of other details with me. After we broke up, Justin didn't end up with Vivian either. He had lost his temper with her and said many harsh things. Vivian, who had some psychological issues, seemed to prefer married men over decent boys. She developed feelings for another senior who was studying for his postgraduate degree, but unfortunately, he was already married. It seemed she took confidence from her interactions with Justin and used the same tactics again, constantly messaging him and asking him out. However, this senior's wife wasn't an easy target. She printed out all the suggestive photos and messages Vivian had sent and pasted them around the neighborhood. The wife also put up banners and used a loudspeaker to broadcast it for 8 hours straight. The wife openly declared, "The couple on the second to third floor of Unit 1 has taught their daughter well. Vivian fell in love with my husband at first sight and relentlessly pursued him. I'm willing to step aside and bless them." Vivian's father slapped her in front of the neighbors. These events spread quickly, and Vivian eventually dropped out of school. Rumors said her family moved away, though no one knew where they went. The love of 12 years wasn't just black or white. There were beautiful moments, but also painful ones. The bright young man I once loved had already left my life. I would keep moving forward, chasing my own light, even if it meant doing so alone. As for Justin, even though I tried to avoid hearing about him, I learned years later that he remained alone. But what was the point? Belated affection is worth less than nothing. The end.